theyeshiva.net.
The Balatanya's son brings in one of his Maimarim that the Maggid of Mizrich, I guess he heard it from his father. He doesn't quote his father, he just says the Maisa about the Maggid of Mizrich that he once saw a keli, a vessel, that was made by a craftsman, obviously. And he said that the craftsman was blind. So the Balatanya said that some people see the koyach hapoyel b'nifel. They could see the koyach hapoyel in the nifel. When they look at something, they see the energy of the one who created it. It's a certain sensitivity. So that's the koyach hapoyel, the one who designed it. And then there's the koyach hapoyel, the one who a craftsman makes from yesh to yesh. He doesn't make from yesh to ayin. He takes clay and he fashions it into a vessel, or silver, or gold, or wood, whatever the material that he's using. Whether it's earthenware, or it's gold, or it's silver, or it's a metal. But that's yesh meyesh. And then there's the deeper poil, the one who's making yesh meyayin. So it's a koyach hapoil b'nifel. So we discussed at length in the last two shiurim last week, Mamala Kalalman, Soivav Kalalman, Dibur, Ratzain. Both are completely inside every created being and outside every created being. Just one relates and accentuates and brings out the individual properties of every created being distinct from the individual properties in another created being, where Soivav Kalalman also is inside the Nivra. It's also an energy that fills it and infuses it, and in fact the main chayas, the main vitality comes from that place, from a Soivav Kalalman. But here, you also have all the details. Here the details don't become a focus where each one is independent. Here the details don't become the focus, meaning even though you have all the details, what's felt is the oneness, the unity. We spoke about this last Wednesday, so after the Shir, I took a flight to Dallas. So it got very delayed. So I had a whole day to be in the airport and then on the plane. And it's a pretty long, it's a few hour flight, almost 4 hours. So I had time to think a little bit. And Dallas, there were a lot of weather storms. There was a very heavy storm there. So the landing was pretty lebedik. It was pretty lively. What they call turbulent. So as we were landing, I was sitting in my seat and I was thinking about Mamala Kalam and Soivav Kalam. So then I realized, I was looking around, every passenger is an individual. And every passenger has his own reasons why he's flying to Dallas. This one is flying, I was flying for a lecture of the Dallas Torah Day School, had a dinner, and I was invited to speak there. Other people were flying, I'm sure, for other reasons. This one for business, this one for family, this one maybe for a very happy occasion, this one maybe for a challenging occasion, this one on vacation. And every person sitting there is with his own thoughts and his own mind, and he is at the center of his universe, and really a very individual person. Then there's the pilot. The pilot is also flying from Dallas. He's bringing everybody there. And I was thinking, here's an interesting mashal. From the perspective of every individual, you have this one flying and this one flying, and each one is doing their own thing and flying for their own purpose. From the perspective of the pilot, he's flying one plane. He also wants to get all the passengers there. But his cheshbon has nothing to do with the individual qualities and properties and experiences of every passenger. He also wants to get the whole plane there. And he wants to get all the passengers there. But from his perspective, he wants to get the plane there. And that includes everybody as one. There's no recognition of the individual distinctions between this person and that person. Even though in the world of each person, it's a completely different cheshbon. I may be going for one reason, you may be going for exactly the opposite reason. But being in that plane, there's a certain oneness that unites us all. And from the pilot's perspective, he doesn't even recognize it. He has one job. His job is to bring this plane from Newark Airport into Dallas International Airport. Now, of course, the metaphor is flawed, because the pilot taka has no interest in the deal. If I'm going to go to pilot and say, by the way, let me tell you about my schedule in Dallas. They say the definition of a nudnik is, you ask him how he's doing and he tells you. Yeah, right? Most people, how you doing? You expect it. Baruch Hashem, I'm good. You start telling the person, I have an issue with my mortgage and I have an issue with this. I didn't really mean to ask you the question. I just meant to be nice. Pleasantries. Yeah. If I start telling the pilot why I'm here and so on, unless he's a personal friend of mine, it's called anudnek. You say thank you, you go over the plane, you say thank you, and you move on. So he's taka, the details are not relevant. He doesn't know about them. He probably doesn't care about them. It's too much to care about, even if he's a nice guy. Here, obviously, we're dealing with the same source, Hashem Echad. We're dealing with one source, where all the details are an inherent part of the plan. But the point is that in the world of Mamale, the details themselves become significant as details. In the world of Soiviv, the definition of every prat is a chelik of the klal. It's not that there's no details, there's no recognition of them. That's also the difference between sometimes the CEO and the manager that we spoke about, or the military commander and the teacher, that in all these details, in all these illustrations, the metaphor falls short in this one area and in a few other areas. Now let's see further inside. I just said, Shahakol niya b'dvarei. This is Mamale Kalalman. So after the brackets, yeah? You see on top it says, Likkutei bracha, the Mizmor Shir, the first column, Tzadik Test, the first column, or page 197. There's brackets. The line starts, V'soiviv kalalman. Mamash in the middle of the page, I don't know, like 10, 15 lines from the top. The line starts, V'soiviv kalalman, right after the brackets. Ein sham, ach yesh bekeser beis b'chinas. Thank you. Ach yesh bekeser beis b'chinas. He said that generally, Mamale kalalman represents kaya chapoyel benifel. The chiyus pnimi. The chiyus, the life force, that's pnimiistic. It goes in. What do we mean it goes in? I don't mean goes in physically. I mean goes in spiritually speaking, metaphorically speaking. Goes in means that it's absorbed by the recipient as his thing, as its thing, as her thing. That's how you identify yourself. And that's what Mamale kalalman is. It's the life force that the Nivra comes to identify with as an individual. And that's why it matches, it's suited to the unique properties of this particular Nivra, because it's a pnimi is the kechios, right? This was understood, yeah? That's why it's called a chayis pnimi. The difference between pnimi and makif is, makif doesn't mean it's not here, it's not inside. But it means it's not experienced as the identity of the one who is receiving it. It's above it. Above it, not in space, but above it in terms of content, of concept. It's above it. It's beyond its limited vessels and containers, where Mamale kalalman is called pnimi, and Soiviv kalalman is therefore called makif. So it's a type of, the relationship with Mamale kalalman is one that this is who I am. It's actually how I describe myself. Because the chiyus is one that infuses the very character and chemistry of the created being. In fact, it creates the very character and chemistry of the created being. And therefore there is diversity. You are not me, and I am not you. So that's called a chiyus, that's pnimi. Pnimi means it infuses and it's internalized within the receptacle, within the container of the created being. Where makif, which means literally surrounding or encompassing, also is inside the keli, but its relationship with it is not one that is experienced by the created being as his thing. This is his identity, because you'll say it hovers above him. And when we say hovers above him, again, I don't mean it in space. We don't mean it in spatial terms. Hovers above means in content that it's a type of chiyus that is transcends. It transcends the limits and the parameters of that identity. In another language, this is the difference between what we call Esa spheres and Keser. The Yud spheres, 10 characteristics, which is Chachma, Bina, Das, and then Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Chod, Yesod, Malchus. These are called Chiyus Pnimi. They are, so to speak, the divine characteristics that create the individuality of all of the worlds, because they are the 10 building blocks of creation, if you wish. The spiritual, divine building blocks of creation are the 10 spheres. They correspond to the 10 utterances, Basara Mamoris, Nivra Ha'olam, which correspond to the 10 spheres, the 10 characteristics. They correspond to the Aseres Hadibros, the 10 commandments. They correspond to Esther Makkos, to the 10 plagues. They correspond to a lot of things. But they are the 10 building blocks of creation, meaning they are the underlying DNA, the spiritual divine DNA of all of creation. There's no creation in the world, from an apple to a mosquito, from any rodent to the greatest galaxy, that is not in some way a manifestation and an embodiment and an expression of one of the 10 spheres, and really a combination of the 10. Like we have in Spheres Emor, right? There's Chesed Shebenetzach and there's Gvura Shebenetzach. It's not, nothing is one-dimensional. There's usually a combination. The question is, what is more emphasized? What is more accentuated? Like this week is the week of Netzach. But Netzach is not just Netzach. There is the Chesed of Netzach. Today is the Gvura of Netzach. Netzach means to win, just as an example. Victory, from the word Nitzachah. Right? The Don Notzach, Nitzchuni Bonai Nitzchuni, Lenatzeach. From the word victory, it also means eternity. But victory is a capacity of the soul to be victorious. It's basically the capacity to triumph despite all odds, to overcome opposition, to overcome adversity, whether the adversity is inside or the adversity is outside. That's Netzach. But Netzach needs Chesed Shebenetzach. Netzach has to be expressed through Chesed. There are people who win, and in that process, they crush. Chesed Shebenetzach means you have to be kind in your victories. Gvura Shebenetzach is the discipline that victory necessitates. So these are all nuances through which the energy is expressed in order for it to be wholesome. It borrows from the other spheres. So the same is true in the building blocks of creation, that every single sphere, for it to be wholesome, requires integration. And integration means I borrow from the other and I give to the other. I take and I give. There is a synergy, there is a symmetry. They work together in a state that we call hiskalolus, integration. That's all connected to Mamala Kalalman. And the system is, the first highest world is the world of Atzilus. The Chesed of Atzilus ultimately will evolve into the Chesed of Bria, which will evolve into the Chesed of Yitzir, which will evolve into the Chesed of this world. The Chesed of this world, when we speak about love in this world, it's called love of Asiya, but it's rooted in a deeper form of energy, which is rooted in yet a deeper form of energy, in this process of evolution or devolution that we call Hishtalshalos. And that makes up the internal character of every single created being, according to its design and purpose from the perspective of the Creator. What we call Ihu Memala Kalam, and He fills all the worlds. Then there's something we call Keser Elyon. And just like the Keser, the crown, is above the head, and the Keser we call Makif Al Harosh, it so to speak surrounds the body, it surrounds the head, it's around the head, it's on top of the head. And that represents the royalty of the Malchus Keser. Keser is the marshal for Soivav Kalalman, the metaphor for Soivav. And Keser is identified with Ratzon, with desire. And as we explained before, that the idea of soiviv is very much connected to ratzon, to desire, because it's basically seeing every detail of the world as a facilitator of his desire, seeing it from the perspective of ratzon, of the desire, where the individual identity of every created being is, its significance is as an implementer, as a facilitator, as a vehicle to fulfill this ratzon, to fulfill this will. The focus, therefore, is not on the diversity and the distinctiveness, but on the oneness and on the holistic wholeness. Not that it doesn't include all the details. Of course it includes all the details. But all the details are seen through the prism and from the perspective of what's called Keser Ratzon. Like the mission statement, right? And the mission statement infuses everything. Because if there's a detail that's not infused by that mission statement, it doesn't belong there. But here the detail is not a detail in and of itself. The detail is part of a wholesome reality, a much larger reality. And therefore, between one detail and the other detail, the difference is only cosmetic, not essential.
Back for a second. So Netzach Shebechesed is different than Chesed Shebechesed.
Of course. Netzach Shebechesed is the way Netzach facilitates Chesed. Chesed Shebenetzach is the way Chesed facilitates Netzach. Netzach Shebechesed means you got to fight for your love. Some people have a lot of Chesed, but not ready to fight for it. They love their children, but they'll never fight for their children. They love a cause, but they'll never fight for it. The moment the principal says no, you're like, okay. Netzach Shebechesed means sometimes you got to fight for things you love. I don't mean that you have to burn down buildings. But I mean, you have to sometimes fight for things you care about. In other words, there will be opposition. Not everything you love is going to come easily. And you have to be able to fight for it. That's the Netzach aspect of Chesed. When Chesed is missing Netzach, it could remain unexpressed, unactualized. It dies in the womb. It's like a miscarriage. I mean, spiritually speaking.
It stays in Sovek, doesn't it?
It's never implemented in the real world because I faced opposition. Like, it would have been nice. It would have been nice in the world of dreams. So Netzach Shebechesed means that the Chesed needs to have an aspect of Netzach, just like it needs an aspect of Gvura. Just like it needs an aspect of Tiferes, of Hoyd, Yesod, etc. Chesed Shebenetzach is the opposite. The focus is Netzach. But Netzach needs Chesed. It needs sweetness to it, yeah. Sometimes you have to overcome obstacles, but you have to be kind about it. Kind.
How do you explain?
And it needs restraint. That's Gvura Shebenetzach, etc. And Netzach Shebenetzach is the Netzach of Netzach. For
How do you explain?
Chesed Shebenetzach? Well, Netzach Shebenetzach is the core. That's that itself. That's the root.
A narcissist is only Netzach Shebechesed.
A narcissist? A narcissist is not necessarily Netzach. A narcissist is just a narcissist.
His own world. Can't the cigars just
Yeah. Yeah. It could express itself also in that. Yesh bekeser beis b'chinas. But yet, when you speak about keser, which is, again, literally the crown, but the crown is a metaphor here to the ratzon, which is soiviv, which transcends the individual details, which what we call keser. And there's two aspects in keser itself. Hainu, it's going to be abstract language here for a few lines, but don't get afraid. Hainu b'china hatachtoina shebematzil. One aspect of keser is known, I'm just literally going to translate, as the lowest dimension. The b'china is dimension or aspect or inyan or theme. The lowest dimension of the matzil. The matzil is the source of atzilus, the emanator. The word atzilus in the world of Kabbalah is known as the highest world. There's Olam HaAtzilus, we said many times, Olam HaAtzilus, Bria, Yitzir, Asiyah. These four worlds are not four distinct worlds that exist in different parts of our universe. The four worlds really means 4 dimensions of every single existence. It's basically, you could put on 4 types of lenses. From one perspective, you'll see the world of Asiya. You could look at the same thing and see it from the perspective of the world of Yetzirah, the world of Bria, and the highest world, which is the world of Atzilus. The word Atzilus comes from the word, 2 words. One is Eitzel, something that's near you, Etzloi v'samach. Like, sit near me, Etzli, right? You'll come to me, you're near me, you're close to me. The word Atzilus is also in the Parshas Ba'alois, Hashem tells Moshe to appoint 70 elders, V'atzalti min haruach asher alecha. The way they translate Vatsalti in the English is, I will emanate. How do you say that in an English that everybody understands? I will emanate from the Spirit on you and confer it on the 70 people. Vatsalti is like, it's not take it from you and give it to them. That's not Atzilus. That's Nesina. I'm not taking from you. It's like Rashi says, Lemadlik ner miner. When you light a candle from another candle, you could light 1,000 candles from one candle, and the first candle is not missing anything, which is unique in the physical world. Usually, if I give you a check for $100, that $100 is going out of my bank account. We can't both have it at the same time because that's the definition of physicality. Physicality has a space. Either it's by you or by me. If I give you my drink, then you have the drink and I don't have the drink. I have to get another drink. The uniqueness of candles is I could light 1 candle, I can light 1,000 candles, and it doesn't take away anything from me. On the contrary, it only increases my light. It increases my influence. And it's basically, in English, there's 2 words. There's power and there's influence. And power and influence, we spoke about this quite a few times, are 2 very different realities. Power, the more you share, the less you have. If I have 100% of 100% battery. I was talking about, let's say I have a business and I own it. 100% of the shares are mine, but I need an investor. And the investor comes and says, no problem, but I want 50% of the shares. I give you 50% of the shares, and I now lost 50% of my ownership. Sometimes I have to give away 80%, sometimes I have to give 90%. That's in the world of power. Power, you share, and the more you give, the less you have. With influence, it's the exact opposite. With influence, the more influence a person has, it doesn't take away from them. For example, let's say somebody has a dream or a vision, and they inspire somebody to carry that dream. It doesn't take away the dream from them. All it does is it increases it. It makes it more broader. And if there's another person. Yeah. There's a famous expression, power dies upon death. When somebody dies, they lose their power. It can't be otherwise. They may have been a king, they may have been a Napoleon. You know, you may have owned the world or think you own the world, but the person dies, that's the end of the power. Influence sometimes begins after death, or sometimes increases tremendously after death. You see certain people that after their passing, their influence actually grows much more, because it works in a completely opposite way than power. That's the difference between Atzilus and other terms. When I'm matzil something, it doesn't go away from me. I confer. A teacher teaches wisdom to a student, he doesn't lose that wisdom. It's not like, oh, I don't have it anymore. I can't teach. If I teach it, you're going to have it. I'm not going to have it. No, you'll have it even more. You will have it, your student will have it, and then your student could share it with others, and then they'll also have it. So it's kamadlik ner miner. So Atzilus, the world of Atzilus is, so to speak, the way the divine light, we call it the world of Atzilus. We don't call it the world of Bria. Bria means a creation. A creation means it's something outside of me. It's yesh me'ayin. Atzilus is not a world outside of Hashem. It's rather a world in which Hashem's infinity is manifested in the 10 lights of the spheres. So it's an emanation from the Ein Sof, the way it's manifested within the 10 characteristics, but they're still completely divine. That's why it's called the world of Eitzel. It's close. It's still very close. It's still the world of unity. Looking at the world, there's a discussion always. It's, for example, say often the Baal Tanya will write the neshama of Rashbi was a neshama of Atzilus, or the neshama of Moshe was a neshama of Atzilus. It says in Svarim, the Arizal said the neshama of the Rambam was a neshama of Bria, for example. The neshama of the Avos were neshamas of Atzilus. The Shvatim were Bria. Yosef was Atzilus. That's where they didn't understand them. What do these words mean? They're not, obviously they're abstract words, but they can also be understood. It means, a neshama of Atzilus, when it walks this world, it has the glasses, the lenses of Atzilus, meaning it looks at the world and it sees the ultimate koyach hapoel benifel. It sees the world from the divine perspective. So it sees the world as a symphony. Every individual, it doesn't just look at the individual from a superficial point of view, I see a piece of flesh. But rather I see the pnimius of every nivra all the way back to its source in the spheros of Atzilus. And then, so that's what the word Atzilus means. That's the word Atzilus. That's what, then you have Bria, then you have Yitzira, then you have Asiya. Those are the general four worlds. We say generally because on an individual level you have myriads and myriads and myriads of worlds. But generally speaking, they're categorized into four. We say it in Yeshayim, Pirkei Avos, the end of Pirkei Avos, Kol hanikra b'shmi, v'lechvoidi, brosiv, yitzartiv, af asis. In Keser itself, though, you have two pchinas. So one he calls pchina hatachtoina shebema'atzil. Ma'atzil is the source of the Atzilus. Ma'atzil is the one who emanates, the one who emits the light, the one who confers. The Ma'atzil is the one who gives. The Ne'etzal is the one who receives. So by Moshe was the Ma'atzil, and the 70 people were the one who received the light of Moshe. V'atzalti min haruach asher alecha v'samti aleihem. I will emanate, I will, so to speak, take part of your energy. Moshe didn't lose anything. It's not like Moshe ceased to be a prophet. Moshe remained much greater than the 70. But something of Moshe's energy was now manifested in these 70 people. They became real students of Moshe Rabbeinu. They became people who represented some of the light, of the wisdom, of the divine inspiration of Moshe Rabbeinu. And the point here was that Moshe Rabbeinu should have people to help him. So Moshe had a certain way of living and a certain way of looking at the world. He needed people who could maybe, it gave him also feedback, yeah? That's another Shir. So Matzil is the source of the Atzilus, the one who is Matzil, and Netzal is the recipient. So he says, there's Keser as Pchina Tachtoina Shebematzil, as the lowest dimension of the one who's creating the Atzilus. Then there's also V'roish v'rishon l'ne'etzalim, Keser as the highest level of the Ne'etzal. Kenoida shekeser ha'amemutza bein ha'matzil l'ne'etzalim. Keser is the intermediary between the Ma'atzil, the source of Atzilus, and the Ne'etzalim and Atzilus. Ukenoida shekol davar ha'memutza tzarich liyas kolol mishnayim. K'ma shekasav Beitz Chaim shar memalev perigim. Anything that wants to be a memutza is a bridge between two completely disparate realities, must encompass both of them. If not, you can't be a memutza. To use the famous illustration that the Rambam had a translator in his lifetime, Ibn Tevon, and he writes in his, the Rambam wrote his works in Arabic. Every sefer of the Rambam was written in Arabic, besides the Mishnah Torah. Every other sefer of the Rambam, his commentary on Mishnayos, his sefer HaMitzvahs, his Moreh Nevuchim, all of his books on medicine, of course. All of the works of the Rambam outside Mishnah Torah were written in Arabic, and they were translated by a man named Ibn Tevon. An old translation, he translated a lot of the classic works. Chayvas Halavavos was written in Arabic, and so forth. So he writes in the introduction to his translation, he says that every translator has to be an expert in the language that he wants to translate from. He has to be an expert in the language that he wants to translate to, and his expertise has to be greater than a regular English speaker, a regular Arabic speaker, because if you have to translate from one language to another language, you're transporting. Languages are very different. I don't know if those of you who are familiar with the art of translation, it's one of the most difficult things, because if you take a novel in Russian or in French, you try translating in English word for word, it's going to be an absolute disaster. Technically, you may be correct, but it will be an absolute disaster. Why? Because you're going to lose the whole geist, the whole spirit of it. Words are not just words. A great writer infuses every word with content, with soul. There's the structure. There's the syntax, how you form a sentence and a paragraph and a chapter. There's a lot of depth in it. Writing is a umnus shleima. It's a serious craft. You see the writers, and there are writers. There are writers, you finish reading them, and you're like, achenvei. It's not worth the paper it was written on. And then your writers, you finish reading them and you're in awe how somebody can articulate themselves this way. So it's the same alphabets, but the writing is completely different. The translator can't just know a basic English like other people, even a good English. His mastery of the language has to transcend ordinary mastery because he has to transport one language into a completely new medium. So you have to know the original language in a uniquely extraordinary way, this new language that you're translating to, and then you have to have the ability to be able to transfer both from one to the other.
You also have to understand the culture.
That's what I mean. Of course, you have to know the idiosyncrasies, what's behind the words, behind the slangs, the expressions, and so forth. You have to have a feel for the... Huh? Yeah, you have a Google Translate. Yeah.
See it every day when you buy something made in China, the instructions, something.
From the Chinese.
It's true. They just translate from Chinese instructions, and it's quite illogical. Yeah, it's senseless. So now, you'll take this in a more abstract way. Take an arbitrator. Two people are having a dispute in business or in marriage or in any issue in life, and they come to an arbitrator. The worst thing the arbitrator can do is take sides. But it's not just on a superficial level. He can't show that he takes sides. Essentially, he has to be able to be one who can experience the world of this person, the world of this person, and then you could create peace. There was a therapist who once told me, he's a very well-known therapist and does a lot of good work, and he told me once that the greatest compliment he gets from his patients is a couple comes to him, and the husband says, then he says, every therapist right away takes my wife's side, but you don't. You don't take my wife's side. You understand my side very well. And the wife says the same thing. Every therapist always takes my husband's side because he has a good mouth. He's a sweet talker. He makes all the problems he puts on me. But you don't do that. You take my side. In other words, everyone has to feel understood. The moment the arbitrator comes in and says, oh, you're an idiot. You're a self-centered, to a narcissist. Get out of the room. You're not an arbitrator anymore. I know there are maybe such situations where you feel that way, but if you want to be successful and you right away share your feeling that this person is completely off and this person is completely right, then forget arbitration. The whole point is you have to really be able to relate to the world of this one and at least not agree with them. You can't agree with them, then you're not going to be an arbitrator, but you have to be able to see the world from their perspective. And then you could see what's bothering them. That's the key. And this is very important. Can you see what's bothering them? Can you see the world from their perspective? Can you recognize their void, their anxiety? It doesn't mean they're right. It could be they're doing foolish things. It could be they're behaving in a foolish way, in an immature way. But can you understand the angst, the pain, the void that this person is experiencing, their expectations that were shattered, their dreams that were destroyed? They're reacting, say in marriage, they're reacting in a certain way because of a certain way of looking at the world. Yes, in their mind, they are the victims. The other person is the perpetrator. They may be completely off. It may exactly be the opposite. But can you understand what they're going through? If you can do that, now there is hope for you to bring the two worlds together. Why? Because you can identify to each person the pain of the other person, and you can demonstrate how the two could come closer together by understanding each other and then working through their disagreements from that perspective. You understand what I'm saying?
His famous book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey, was like the biggest bestseller of all time. So it's the habit 5 is seek to understand before being understood.
Yeah.
And he said many, many times in life, this was absolutely the most difficult habit. He was very many shalom.
Yeah. Seek to understand before being understood. Now it sounds, at a Shir, it sounds very beautiful. What's so difficult? But if you're having a serious emotional issue with somebody, try it out and you'll see it's not so simple. Because it's very simple when we're talking about in an abstract way. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Try to understand the other person. As long as it's a person who has nothing to do with you. He lives in China and having a dispute with his chavi, you got no issue. But when it comes to a very personal issue and it's triggering deep emotional pain, it's hard to seek to understand. And it doesn't mean the person is right. It just means I have to see the world from your perspective if I want to create healing. If I'm giving up on the relationship, then I don't have to see the world from your perspective. But that would be a sad thing if the relationship is valuable. This is what we mean. Every memutza, if you want to be a memutza in life means you want to be the bridge that brings together the two sides of the river. There's only if you're connected to each side. If you eliminate one side, you say, I have no interest in you, you're a nobody, you can't be a bridge. The bridge is always the one who can bring together two worlds, who can bring together the two strings, the two ropes from the two sides. That's what we mean. The Eitz Chaim means that the memutza has to be kolul. He must encompass the world on one side, the world on the other side, and now I could serve as a middleman, as a memutza. The memutza comes from the word emtza, in the middle. You become like the intermediary, the arbitrator who brings them together.
So I see that the stronger the relationship with the other person, then the harder it is to understand the difference of things.
Well, I would say that I don't know if the stronger the relationship is, but the stronger there is, the more pain there is, the more disappointment there is. It just becomes so entrenched that we just say, I'm an innocent guy and I went into this with so much innocence, and this person is just completely crazy or dysfunctional, and then you dig into life with your claws and you remain there, and it's very hard to get out of your position. If somebody has been married for 20, 30 years and their marriage is not a good one, there's certain paradigms they have developed that usually developed the night of the wedding. And it's maintained. That's when the things, Sheva Brachas is when everything happens. The first 7 days, you develop your attitude. Every fight afterwards is just a hemshech. It's the same argument just in different words. In Kabbalah, it's called different sirufim. It's just different words. Here it's about the grocery, here it's about where we're going for Pesach, here it's about the summer, it's about it's the same argument. Huh? Very good. You say skip the Sheva Brachas. If it was that easy.
7 weeks, you fix each week, you fix another.
The 7 weeks is connected to Sheva Brachas, to fix up every day what happened at the Sheva Brachas. Now I understand the halacha says that every day of Sheva Brachas you need a panim chadashas. You need a new face. So it's not just you need but also you have to be able to see your spouse every day of Sheva Brachas as a new person. That's the really panim chadashas. In halacha, it's not it's a joke. A new face, we're all happy. If I saw you yesterday, we can't do Sheva Brachas. Sorry, you're already a boring guy. We bring in a shleper from the streets, yeah? A shleper, Baruch Hashem, panim chadashas. Now you can make Sheva Brachas. The pshat is a new face means there's a fresh energy. There's a fresh perspective, because that's always the key. And that's what the memutza really accomplishes. The reason it's like this in this world, like everything in this world, is because that's how it is in this source.
It sounds like memutza has to be totally true.
Very.
To both sides.
Very.
I'm thinking here in life, in my life experience, people are very good negotiators. It's often compromise. They sort of bring both sides together, but not truthfully.
They say for Rabbi and Eibshitz that Shatchen is a Rosh Tevis, Sheker, Doiver, Kesef, Neutel. Shatchen says lies and takes money. I mean, Hakol Lefiyah Mevayesh V'Mizbayesh, sometimes the situations, I guess sometimes, a cold peace is better than a hot war. You have to do the best you can. Sometimes the best you can do is create and negotiate some type of understanding, some type of truce. Hinini noisenloi is brisi shalom, right? The vav of shalom is a upgehakte vav. It's a vav ketia by Pinchas. It's a vav. It's cut off. I was once at a minyan, so the Balkair was Shabbos Mincha, and the Balkair is reading, and he says Sefer Torah is pasul. They take out a second Sefer Torah. He says it's pasul. I take a look. It's the shalom of Pinchas. It's supposed to be chopped off. He decided it's pasul because he didn't know. So I saw once, I think it was from either one of the, maybe Reb Naftali of Rupsh, it's one of the great Hasidic masters, I don't remember who. And he says that, peace, sometimes a person feels that the peace is not perfect. He says, don't delegitimize that peace. In other words, sometimes peace is not the perfect peace where the two people merged as one. You have to give legitimacy to that also. Sometimes it's not possible to create the ultimate peace. But a relative peace is also better than war, better than conflict. Doesn't have to be, doesn't mean he becomes your best friend, but better than conflict is showing good. When there's fighting and bitterness and hate and resentment, it's a destructive force. In families, yeah? Some people have a lot of issues with their in-laws and brothers-in-law and sisters-in-law. Some families are very close. It doesn't always work. Sometimes there's very big differences. But when there's war, it's destructive. There's peace, you could speak to each other, you could be normal, you could be cordial, it's already a blessing. Would it be nice if everybody was warm and fuzzy and lovey-dovey? Of course. But it's sometimes an expectation that at least till Mashiach comes is not always actualized. So sometimes a compromised peace is far superior to a full-blown war in the name of emes, in the name of truth. In the name of truth, I'm never speaking to you again in my life, in the name of truth. You know what I mean? That's So when we talk here, this is what we have to understand. Atzilus is a world of divinity, but it's the way the divine is manifested in character, in 10 spheres. The Ein Sof itself is undefined. The intermediary between Ein Sof and the world of structure of Atzilus is Keser. Keser could be a memutza because Keser has both aspects. That's what he means. Keser has pchine tachtoina shebematzel. It represents, so to speak, the lowest dimension of the Ein Sof, which is the source of Atzilus. But it also represents the Rishon L'Ne'etzalim. The memutza, in order to be able to bring together infinity and a universe, must have both components. It has to have the element of Ein Sof. It also has to have the element of Atzilus. It has to have both, because a memutza has to include both dimensions. V'hinei roish v'rishon l'ne'etzalim. So when you speak about Keser, there's Keser, the way Keser is the crown of Atzilus, the first of the Ne'etzalim. Above Chachma, the first existence of Atzilus is Keser. That's Keser in its lowest plane, the way Keser is the leader of Atzilus. Hu hanikra arich anpin. That is known as arich anpin, which literally means the long face. Arich anpin. Shehu makar, it's the source. Shemimenu nimshachim is havus eser tikunim. Yud spheres da Atzilus b'bchinas ishtalshalos. It's the source from which emerge the 10 tikkunim. 10 tikkunim means the 10 garments, the 10 characteristics, the 10 lights of Atzilus in the evolution of Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Yisod, Malchus, and the expression of the Zohar, Chad Arich, Chad Ktsir, V'Chad Beinani. There are 3 columns of spheres. One is called long, one is called short, and one is called intermediary. You have the right column, the left column, and the center column. Mashenken arich ampin atzmoi hu makif soivav kol almin ba'ashva achas. Arich ampin itself, which is the keser, that's what we call soivav, makif. It includes all of them equally. So arich ampin would be like the rotzoin, the keser above the head, which is the source from which all of the individual spherois emerge and from which the whole process of mamalei kol almin begins. So Atzilus begins the process of Mamalik Halalman, the divine energy that fills the worlds in an individual fashion through the 10 spheres. Each aspect is a result of one or a combination of the spheres. And Arich Anpin, Aleph, Arich Anpin, is considered the Keser, the crown, that encompasses all of the 10. It's the source of all of the 10. That's what we call the Soivav Kalam, that encompasses all the worlds. And it's Bahashva Achas, Hashava, Mashva, Katan, V'Gadol. The greatest and the biggest are one, because Soivav Kalam encompasses all of them equally. That is called Arich Anpin. This is the Keser, that is the source of Atzilus.
Is that the B'china of Tachtomish of Atzilus?
That's no, that's B'china Yoina Shabbatzilus. That's the translator as the one who represents the highest of the world that receives. It's the way the Mamutza is relating to the worlds.
Kesser is a conjoining of the two, of the Aruch Anpin.
Kesser is the interface. The interface.
The Aruch Anpin with the...
Kesser is the interface between Ein Sof and Atzilus. Okay? How could it be the interface? The interface must have both dimensions. So now we spoke about the lowest dimension of Kesser. Kesser as the source of all of the worlds. Or in other words, Kesser as Soiviv Kol Alman. Soiviv Kol Alman as the origin of Mamalik Kol Alman. This is the lowest element of Kesser, which is higher than all the worlds, because it's a bridge, it's an interface. But there's another element in Kesser. What's the other element in Kesser? It's an interface between the divine infinity and the world. So it's also the lowest element of the Ma'atzil, the source of Atzilus. Hu hanikra atik. This is called, in all of the writings of Kabbalah, of Nistra, of Pnimi Torah. Now, when somebody looks through works of Kabbalah or Chassidus, whether it's Zoya, whether it's writings of the Arizal, whether it's writings of Chaim Vital, whether it's writings of the Ramak, whether it's writings of the Vilna Gaon, any Sfarim of Kabbalah, from all generations, the writings of Ramchal, earlier generations, later generations, will always see these terms. Atik, Arich, Atzilus, Spheris, Kesser, etc. But here he's giving the definition. Atik is also Kesser, but it's not Arich. Aleph is Kesser, the lower dimension of the interface. Atik is the higher dimension of the interface. Miloshen Hamatik Harim. In Tanakh we have an expression Hamatik Harim, which means he removes Matik, removes mountains. What does it mean? She'ena roich klal liyut Spheris hanetzala. This is completely above, beyond. Mutak is removed, aloof, sublime, completely transcending the 10 spheres of Atzilus, the 10 spheres which were emanated. Ve'ein shayach likrei af b'shem makif. That element of Kesser called Atik, we can't even call Makif. Shekol Makif hu sheyesh lo eze shaychus. Makif means there's a relationship. Rak, there's a relationship. It's a relationship of Makif. It's not a relationship of Pnimi, but it's a relationship. It's a relationship that encompasses, rather, one that is internalized in the details, but it's still a relationship called Makif. That can only relate to the lower dimension of Kesser. The lower dimension of Kesser, which is Arich Ampin, is called Soiviv. It's called Makif. Why? Because it represents Soiviv Kalalman. But when we speak about the higher dimension of the interface, which is called Atik, not Arich, it's not the source of the 10 spheres. You can't relate it to the 10 spheres. Why? Because it's not even on the level of Makif. It's completely transcends it. So what's the term for it? Raknikre Makif de Makif. It's called the Makif of the Makif, meaning it's Makif even above the Makif. It transcends even the transcendence because it's completely a different realm. That's the concept of Kesser, but the higher level of Kesser. So Kesser is the Memutza, it's the intermediary, the interface between pure divinity, so to speak, pure infinity which is undefined, not defined by any fashion, not even Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. These are all definitions, divine definitions, but definitions, and a universe which is based on structure, definition, diversity, individuality. Kesser is the interface. Kesser must have both. The translator has to know both languages. But here, it's not just two languages, Russian and English, or French and Hebrew, or Japanese and Portuguese. Here, the two languages are two languages. One is beyond language and one is language. One is infinity and one is structure. Kesser has to speak both languages. So that's why we speak about two dimensions in Kesser. We speak about two dimensions because our language is limited, so we have to split it in two dimensions. Obviously, it's not like there's a split in the middle of Kesser, but it's two aspects of Kesser. One is Kesser as a reflection of the new language that we call Arich Anpin. That's called Soiviv Kalalman. That's called the Kesser above Atzilus. That is like the first level of Atzilus, the highest level of Atzilus. From there, the whole Atzilus Bri Yitzir Asiya will begin. It's still above it because it's the interface. It's the translator. But it's the beginning of that language. It's the beginning, the genesis, what he calls Roish V'Rishon, the head and the beginning. of Atzilus and everything below. That's what we call Soiv of Kalalman. But then there's Keser, as tuning into the language that's pre-Atzilus, that transcends Atzilus, the language of Ein Soif. That's Keser as the B'china Tachtoina Shebema'atzil. Not Keser as the beginning of Atzilus, but Keser as the final step of the one who is the source of Atzilus, the Matzil. That we call Atik. Sometimes we call it Atik Yoimin. Atik. Atik means completely removed, completely beyond, completely transcendent. Keser captures that aspect as well. That you don't call soiviv, you don't call it makif, soiviv kalalman, because it has no relationship with the world, even on the level of makif. This we would call makif lemakif. That's the keser, the higher level of keser. Now, some of you are sitting here and you don't know what in the world I am talking about. Don't feel so bad, because I also don't know exactly what I'm talking about, to be honest. But this is quite profound stuff, abstract stuff. However, as we shall see, this is just the map, so to speak, outlining the map of it. But the ideas are powerful ideas, and their ramifications in life. You're also wondering, how in the world is this relevant to a person's life? So that's step 2 that we will get into. But this is just a general map of the Baal HaTanya's description of the difference between Atik and Arich, as he will move on to explain Be'ezer Hashem. Have a wonderful day.
I think if you listen to it, do it again the last 15 minutes.
If you have a chance, listen to the previous Shir also. Was macht er?
Same mold in other form.
Panem Chadashes.
Because he's the Emor, right?
Yeah, I tried.
I guess we just start remaking the Panem Chadash, so reincarnate.
Sometimes you see the same experience with the teenagers.
What?
No, you try preaching to them for so many years now, so they
Stimmt
go.
sehr gut an.
Yeah.
Mitalmida Yosem Mikulam.
So you try to understand their perspective.
Sit
The
down.
waxman once said, "No one knows as much as a 15-year-old bacher. No one knows better than a 15-year-old bacher."
It's very hard, yeah. Sometimes fathers forget what it was like when they were teenagers, you know.
Alles war ein
Sometimes Chacham forget how they were making.
Basically, I was out by the bus.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.